I guess we live in a world that is constantly changing, and with change it makes people anxious.
But in some scenarios, do you think we use the word anxious more these days in contexts that it might not be applicable?
Well, I guess, you can be anxious is an emotion. You can feel anxious for lots of little things. So when someone says I'm anxious, it's just recognising a feeling that they have. But then...
Hey, I'm Zeb.
And I'm Maddie.
And welcome to the We Don't Know Yet podcast. Whilst both Maddie and I are healthcare practitioners, we understand that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare. Should you require any medical attention, please seek out your local healthcare practitioner. We're joined by Anna Nikolaou, and you are from Macleod Wellness, and you are the director and principal psychologist there.
Yes,
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks,
for having
Seb.
me.
Thank you for
That's
the
okay.
team.
I don't usually do the intros because I usually butcher it a lot, but that's okay.
We don't have our
You did
off
well.
days. Yeah.
Yeah. But thank you so much for coming up here.
No,
This is
thank you.
awesome.
I'm excited.
I said to Maddie, I'm so excited to have someone from Melbourne in room with us because usually we're doing some Zooms here and there from around Australia, but this has worked out really well.
I'm in awe as well of your day, landing so early.
Yes, it has been a really early start, but that's okay. I'm hoping I'm still fresh, fresh enough.
Oh, you can sound very fresh. We're lucky that we get you first cab off the rank today.
Yes.
Great.
It is. But we've got an awesome topic to unpack today. I think anxiety is something that in today's day and age gets spoken about a lot, and I think sometimes it falls into or it is an umbrella term essentially, right? And I think people use it in different contexts in different ways. So I think it'd be really cool to just unpack what it actually is today.
Yeah.
Before we dive too deep into it though, give us a little bit of a backstory of you. What kind of brought you into the space of psychology?
Oh gosh, I think just naturally my personality is to want to help, and I'm an observer. I think just naturally I'm an observer. I'm a listener. So I think I just fell into the idea of, I loved my Year 12 psychology subject, but then I just went down the path of psychology and counselling, and I just love seeing people going from struggling to thriving, and I find that so rewarding, just seeing how you can make that shift just by implementing some changes.
It is really nice as a healthcare practitioner, isn't it? It's almost like one of the biggest joys of the job is seeing people go from when you first meet them to...
And to see that change, like how, when you remember when they first sat in your chair and how they presented, and then you see the end result, and it's like, wow, it's just such a proud moment to see them doing well and thriving.
I think as well from the other end, it's so easy to get caught up in not kind of celebrating those wins. To work with someone who highlights that and points out, how far you've come is so nice as well.
Yeah, and we always do that in our sessions. Always, it's important to reflect on, because sometimes they can be small changes, and the client's looking at the end result, but you can minimise the little wins. So it is important to always reflect on, how much you're progressing and the changes that you're making.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so where did you study in Melbourne? I didn't even ask that question before.
Oh my gosh, I studied at all the different universities because as you know, if you go straight through, we were talking about this before, it's a minimum 6 years. So my undergrad was at Monash Uni. My graduate diploma was at Deakin. Then I did another graduate diploma that was at Melbourne, and my master's was at Swinburne University. So I went to all the universities.
I was lining up. Melbourne.
Melbourne. I know all these names for one. Usually we have guests in and we're talking about Sydney unis, and I'm like, I don't know where any
you
of
can
those
actually
are.
map out where we are in all
where we
those
were.
different unis.
That's fantastic. And so have you always worked in the private practice space then?
At the start, whilst I was doing my master's, I was working within an organisation. But once I had my firstborn, I decided to go into private practice. So I've been in private practice for 20 years now.
Yeah, wow. And I imagine over that time, society or the scenes of society has definitely changed quite vastly. From your experience in private practice, would you say that we are living in more of an anxious society now, or are we maybe more aware of anxiety like that awareness is
I
playing
think
a
it's
role?
both. I think we are more aware of anxiety. We understand it more. We sort of are aware of the symptoms of anxiety, but it is a lot more prevalent now, and we've got a lot more triggers to anxiety than what we've had before. When we look at, I guess we live in a world that is constantly changing, and with change, it makes people anxious because we like predictability. We like that certainty of what's going on and what's ahead. But with the ongoing changes, we struggle. We struggle with adapting.
Yeah. Do you find there's a lack of definition of what anxiety looks like? Because in today's day and age, I think we throw out the words like anxious or I'm feeling anxious without having a real appreciation for what anxiety actually is depicted like. And I know everyone is so different in their presentation, but in some scenarios, do you think we use the word anxious more these days in contexts that it might not be applicable?
Well, I guess, you can be anxious is an emotion. You can feel anxious for lots of little things. So when someone says I'm anxious, it's just recognising a feeling that they have. But then, there's different sort of range of, feeling anxious and anxiety to, when it's debilitating anxiety. So we do throw it around a lot, but it is an emotion that we all experience. I guess there's just different degrees and intensity of anxiety.
Yeah. And I like what you say there in terms of the different degrees, because you're right, there is like a more debilitating presentation that I'm sure you would see a lot more in private practice than, the day-to-day stress of life getting to a lot of people who don't always kind of feel the need to come in and talk about it face-to-face in the private practice setting as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So coming back, I guess, to how you do feel like it is more prevalent, and you mentioned that obviously the rapidly changing environment is definitely playing a key role. Like, what are some of the factors that are influencing that? I didn't articulate that too well, but...
Well, I guess when we look at the triggers that we're exposed to a lot more now, with technology is constantly advancing. We're trying to keep up. We're trying to understand it.
Yeah.
With technology, it changes the way we go about our day. It changes the way we socialise. It can change the way we work. So again, with change, we can feel anxious. There's a lot to understand and unpack.
Yeah.
And to, a lot of people worry about, well, how is this going to impact me? So I think with the advancements in technology, it can be a trigger to anxiety. Even with the older generations, just trying to understand and get your head around it. I think the younger ones are pretty good at embracing new changes to technology and are really good at navigating. But we see with older generation, they really are anxious and overwhelmed. It's just a lot and they just can't keep up.
Yeah.
Social media is another trigger to anxiety. I think a lot of people get pulled into, the comparing and looking at what other people are doing and questioning what they're doing, thinking they're falling behind or they're not doing something right when everyone else looks like they're having so much more fun and so much more successful. And I think comparing themselves to things out there that actually aren't even real most of the time.
Yeah.
So social media can be, I think is a big trigger to a lot of people's anxiety to how they sort of feel about their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Even I guess the likes of TikTok, where it is quite that like incessant, fast-paced scrolling, it can be quite anxiety-inducing.
Well, that's it. Even just that, just the pace of the way we live now, everything is so much faster and we're just doing a lot more and we're adding more things to our day and, we start to get overwhelmed and we tend to burn out eventually. But again, that's with technology advancing, it's almost like, the more things that are put in place that are supposed to make our day-to-day things easier, we end up adding more to our day. So, for example, the washing machine, washing your clothes, back in the day, they used to hand wash their clothes, whereas then the machine does it for them. So it doesn't mean that the machine's washing your clothes and now you've got extra time to just relax. It's like, well, now what else can I add to my day? So even though we've got these, things that are making life easier, it's doing that, but then we're adding more. So we just keep adding more and more to our load.
Yeah.
So it's actually not making our life easier.
That is a really good point. I'm even thinking about myself this morning making toast and why the toaster was cooking, or the toast was cooking rather, like I was wiping the bench, putting a load of washing on, like not just sitting.
That's right. So we're just adding more things. So we think we've got all these sort of devices or other things that are going to make our day-to-day tasks easier, but we just end up adding more.
Yeah.
And you're right, you do feel like you need to keep up these days because you see other people online that seem like they have these super efficient life hacks. You know, they can maintain that excessive work ethic without really kind of like dropping the ball or feeling like they're overwhelmed to some capacity, right?
Yeah. And also you're getting lots of information overload, like different tips and hacks and ideas and advice, and it's almost like, you know,
Too much.
it's too much that it can get confusing and overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, now that you say that, like I was telling Maddie, for all the viewers at home, I got a new iPad the other day. But the other day, like I literally sat at home for like half the day researching how I can be more efficient with my iPad. Right? Yeah, I did. I was like, how can I like set this up in a way where I can do more and tick more off my list? But you're right, like it's just trying to really like we're trying to squeeze everything into these hours that we almost don't have. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a lot. Do you feel like as well, especially in Australia of recent, like the economic uncertainty, for lack of a better way of saying it, has been a big contributor?
Course. Definitely. Yeah. And, you know, with the cost of living increasing, that is another trigger to anxiety. You know, how are we going to make this work? Yeah. You know, does that mean we get another job? Again, loading more on our plate.
Yeah.
So all those factors definitely contribute to anxiety and why we're seeing it more in society now.
Yeah.
And like outside of those kind of staples with technology and social media, are there any other factors or contributors that you see popping up as some trends that kind of contribute to people's levels of anxiety?
Well, I think what we see with anxiety and what's common is that it's people, they're trying to predict and control the future. And this is what I was saying before about we actually as humans need predictability to understand our world. So with a lot of changes that are, you know, ongoing, it can make you feel anxious because, you know, things aren't as predictable as they once were.
Yeah.
We see a lot of clients coming in where it's they're just trying to think of possible outcomes in the future to be prepared for, but the problem is they're always negative.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're trying to think of every negative possible situation in the future so they can be better prepared for.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is then you start, you know, experiencing anxiety as if, you know, it's happening. Yeah. I think when we start thinking about things that could go wrong, you actually start experiencing the anxiety as if you're living it at that moment.
Yeah.
And it almost would freeze you in a place as well because you don't want to make the wrong move. So you don't, it's almost like that. You don't want to make the wrong move, so you're not going to make any move at all.
Well, that's right. It's that fear. So the moment we start feeling fear, then we freeze.
Yeah.
So I do see that a lot. That is common. You know, the worst case scenarios, or what if this goes wrong, or what if this is to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just their way of wanting to control. But the problem is it does the opposite.
Yeah.
It just heightens anxiety and then they're out of control.
Yeah. Do you feel like in a way it almost makes it more likely that the worst case scenario does then eventuate?
Well, sometimes they do make it happen because their behaviour, because they've made themselves so anxious by thinking of the worst case scenario, that their behaviour is different.
Yeah.
Like they might not go for an opportunity because the fear is so great, or they may just slip up on certain things that if they weren't so anxious, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, yeah. Is confirmation bias the right way to say it here? Yeah. So it's almost like the negative thing happens. It's like, oh, I knew it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I feel like, do you notice any trends in terms of industries that like you see more regularly from the perspective of, like, I'm trying to pinpoint, is there a particular like profession or something that really pops up a lot across the board from the perspective? Like, I know we talk a lot about the digital landscape and how tech is ever changing. So I can imagine there'd be a capacity of some people in that workspace who get burnt out or are just overwhelmed by the sheer work volume they have to undergo. But are there any other industries that you tend to see like come through the door?
Really, I just think it's just so general. I think just a lot of people are just anxious. I don't think it's industry specific. I just think we've just got a lot on our plate. We're trying to do more. Expectations are high, demands high. We're comparing all the time. It's hard to keep up.
When that anxiety becomes quite prolonged or chronic, do you ever find that you get clients that present and I guess think that they're fine, but you have to almost like highlight that they've just been living with this like underlying anxiety for so long that it's become the new norm?
Yeah, like it's to them that's normal. That's their normal state. But you can see when they come in just by their breathing. Yeah. You know, you can see when they're sort of doing that tight, shallow breathing. You can see they're anxious, but they don't necessarily see it. Because to them it's normal. It's become normal.
Similar to what we've been talking about in the past with stress. It's like that chronic stress, or it's kind of part and parcel with anxiety, I imagine. Yeah,
well, I was just even thinking of some of the other conversations we've had about that, like sympathetic drive. It's almost like their body's stuck in the go space. Like you can almost get a read on someone before they even sit down and start talking with you by the sound of it. In terms of like going about these conversations with people, how like do you find it difficult to like almost, because I can imagine in that context the people that are finding it hard to believe that that's just their new normal. Like how do you go about actually unpacking that with them?
Well, you know, I think they've acknowledged it is some sort of a problem if they're coming to see me or a psychologist. So it's really just slowly, you know, getting them to see it themselves by pinpointing things they talk about or situations they're raising. You know, just gently sort of with your questioning, get them to, you know, highlight areas of maybe their thinking that's triggering anxiety, for them to sort of start realising, oh, yeah, okay.
This is what I'm living.
She has a point.
She has a point.
Have you had scenarios when people have come in, they're like, don't know why I'm here, but I'm
here?
Yes,
or they're there for someone else and really it's the other person that's got the problem. And
I didn't even think about that one.
No, well, I'm here because I need to try and change the person at home. It's like,
it's not me, I swear. I just need to vent about something.
Exactly. But we do sometimes get that.
Never a boring day, I imagine.
No, always different.
And so what kind of an approach do you use as a psychologist as well? Because I know just like I'm an osteo, May's a dietitian, we have different, we've got different tools on our tool belt, things that we kind of use with our patients or clients. Like in terms of your practice itself, like are there different styles of psychology that you use?
Yeah, there's different approaches. It's about your assessment and reading that person to see what they would, you know, be able to handle and take on, or, you know, if we've got someone who's a little bit more defensive or a bit more reserved, then we might just gently start with just some self-care sort of strategies, something that's more, you know, doable and, you know, sort of setting small goals, nothing too deep, what we feel that they're capable of working on. But gradually you start wanting to build up to getting them to identify, you know, their thought patterns and the impact of their thoughts on their mood and their mood, how it impacts their behaviour and their outcomes and the way they interact with others. You know, we want to get more to that deeper level of understanding about themselves and how their thoughts are impacting how they're feeling and how they go about their day. But it is always tailored. So, you know, it's about the person sitting in front of you and seeing their readiness to change and then how gentle you go. Or, you know, there's some that are quite insightful and they're ready to go straight in.
Yeah, similar, I suppose, to our practice as well in terms of like assessing that motivation to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, picking and choosing what style you're kind of going for based on what the person's ready to kind of give you, I suppose.
And you're working around, you know, where they're at, their mood at the time. You know, one day, one session could be different to the next session.
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier, like there's the demands of day-to-day life, working, running a family, living, being a human, basically. It's all these things pile up and it can be quite overwhelming. How, if you don't mind sharing, like when you are working with someone or working with a client, how do you go about managing the demands of daily life, but also prioritizing mental health and that downtime as well when the to-do list is piling up?
Yeah, I know. And that's a lot of people say, I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
But we really have to prioritise the time, because if we don't have good mental health, everything else is going to collapse.
Yes.
So, we've got to think about long term. If we want to be there for our family, we want to be at our best at work, we need to prioritise our mental health.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point? And there is always time. I mean, if we look at our screen time,
No, not the screen time.
Don't do it.
have a look. Sometimes I say to the clients, get your phone, have a look at the screen time amount. Whatever that is, that could have been, we could prioritise a little bit of that to some self-care.
Yeah. I think that can almost be a bit of a fallacy that is self-care as well, but it is still so exhausting.
Yeah.
Being on the scroll,
Yeah.
that can be really triggering. It's not necessarily downtime.
Yes.
Because it's interesting. Sometimes you hear people like they plonk on the couch and relax, and they go, time to relax and just have a bit of me time, like dive into the hole a little bit. But you're right. It almost is like they're escaping one stressful scenario to then
I don't think I've ever felt rested.
No, whereas you could have gone for a walk for 10 minutes
Yeah.
and you would have come back feeling like a different person.
We actually sat down with, we kind of have a little community off to the side of this
For
health professionals. And we sat down with a health professional recently and unpacked the topic of burnout. It's something that we've kind of covered a little bit. We actually did an episode on it, I think.
Way
It was
back when. It was early.
second episode
Yeah.
ever. But obviously burnout's something that in day-to-day life people are referencing a lot more as well. Do you have strategies or things that you can suggest to people who might be feeling that burnout and things that they can potentially do to help break up their burnout feelings?
Aside from, I guess, what you were just saying earlier around implementing those small bits of self-care.
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognise that you're experiencing burnout, and that's when you need to stop and assess, what is it that I'm doing right now that is making me struggle? Is there something I need to change or shift or give up? Am I taking on too much? Can I delegate some of this stuff out? So I think it's important to recognise, where's the burnout coming from? Is it that I've taken on too much? And can I change it in some way? But then there's the self-care strategies I was talking about before. Going for a walk is great to just, relieve a lot of stress and tension and clear the mind. There's strategies. Do you want me to talk about some strategies?
Yeah.
It's like a free therapy.
So I think it's important to try and be present at times, because we are constantly on the go, and we are doing a lot, but then we're also in our head a lot. We're not fully present and engaged in what we're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can, relate when someone's talking to you. You're also thinking about, what do I need to get
My dog at
the
home.
supermarket? What am I cooking? Your dog at the home? Is he okay? And we're not fully engaged in that conversation with the person in front of us because our mind is elsewhere. And this is something we all really need to practice, is holding attention in what we're doing at the time, because I think that's a good way. Because a lot of the burnout is mental burnout. It's not necessarily that we're doing a lot in our day, but we have a lot of thoughts constant that's just exhausting us, and that's leading to burnout. So it's a great way to practice just being present in the moment. It's just focusing on your senses.
Yeah.
So on a walk, just notice what you can see. Look around you, look at the trees, look at the colour of the leaves. What can you smell? What can you hear? What can you touch? Grab a flower and touch the petals. So you're really grounded and present in that moment, and you will enjoy your walk so much more. Like, try it. It's such a much better experience when you're going on a walk and being really present, instead of going on a walk and thinking about all the things you've got to do when you get back from your walk.
Yeah.
And we were talking about before, like, obviously moving up to Sydney, I have the luxury of having a surf beach right down the road. But it's like that feeling of almost when you take your shoes off and you walk on the sand and you just go, oh, that feels so good on, like, underneath the feet.
You're noticing you're noticing your senses. You're noticing the feeling, the sensation of the sand. So you're being really present in that moment.
Yeah.
And, it's a much more enjoyable experience, and it is really relaxing.
Yeah, and I don't think we do it enough right these days. Like
No, we don't. We're constantly distracted. We just haven't. We can't hold attention anymore like we used to, and that's something we've got to practice.
Yeah. And I guess on the topic of burnout as well, work stress is inevitable, or life stress is inevitable. How do you help a client navigate the stress without burning out? Like, I guess I know we've talked about implementing some daily strategies to prevent burnout, but I guess from a stress management side of things, is it similar or is there anything different?
So we're talking about in the workplace? Yeah. I think in the workplace we need to look at, again, like I mentioned before, what is it that I'm taking on in my day? Is it realistic? Is it doable? Or do I need to reduce some of my load, or do I need to speak to my employer about making some changes? Because sometimes we take on a lot at work. We're a people pleaser. We say yes all the time, and we can't actually meet half of those demands, and then we are stressed and burnt out because we're taking work home. We're trying to find ways to get it done. So we do need to stop and look at, is this actually doable? And then if it's not, well, what do I need to change?
And that's such a big thing these days, like bringing work home. With the digital age and everything. I am so guilty of that. But like we all do. We sit there on our laptops at the dinner table or, you know, like in the office at home. It's kind of one of those things, especially since COVID now, everyone's got an office at home because there was such a big demand for work from home. But, you know, it's so easy to go and set up in there and get lost for a couple of hours. Well, this is what I was saying, like before, with technology now, we've got these things that are meant to, they're set up to make things easier. Like we can work remotely. It's meant to be an easy thing for us. But we actually then take on more. So now we're at home taking on more work and we should just be home and be present with our family and friends. It is a tricky one though, isn't it? Because like you said, the demands of our work sometimes are quite overwhelming. So like you said, it needs to be a bit of a balance between, right, like is there a line that I can draw in the sand and be like, right, this is it for me today? Or like, is this a conversation that I need to have with my workplace from the perspective of like, yes, I'm like doing my best to get everything done in the working day, but I also sometimes, you know, and sometimes you do have to work late hours and you do have to kind of push that limit a little bit. But there's times when, especially you're feeling quite overwhelmed, that you need to have that conversation with the employer and be like, right, I'm not coping with this.
Listen here, Greg.
Listen here, Greg.
Sometimes, if we've got deadlines, we might have to stay back. But if it's ongoing, constant, where there's just no relief, then that's when you've got to look at, why am I doing this? And sometimes it's just we do it to ourselves, you know, and it's about even recognising what is driving me. Why am I taking on more work?
And it is that chronic load, isn't it? Like you said, like cumulative periods of doing like or working to that capacity can be really intense versus having like an acute spurt where you kind of go, right, I've got to knuckle in and get this done over the next few days. But once I do that, I don't have to worry about it anymore. I can go on a holiday. I can do X, Y, and Z.
The lights at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, plan out some strategies to break it up, right?
Yeah, but what we see with people with workplace burnout is, it's constant. There's no relief. You know, they're taking it home and then it starts impacting their home life. And, you know, then they're not eating during the day, so now we're impacting, you know, health.
Have you found it to be a helpful thing, that new law that came in with the, like it's a legal requirement, it's not a legal, how do I articulate it properly? No, the new law
where
that
you
came
can't
in.
contact.
Yes. Thank you, Anna. There we go. So
you're not allowed to email or make contact with
your employer. Or employees.
Your employees after work hours.
We got there. Thank you. Has that been helpful though? Like, have you found in your experience in practice that that's been helpful for clients to not take so much stuff home at all?
Well, I think, like I said before, I think it's sometimes we do it to ourselves. So a lot of my clients, they're doing it. Right. It's not necessarily the employers contacting them after hours. They've got to look at what's driving me to keep working at home. I find they do it to themselves without realising the impact it's having. Well, sometimes towards the end they do realise, but they can't see a way out. And that's what we work through in sessions. You know, how can we get out of this level of cycle? This level of work that's not healthy.
I didn't even realise that was a new law. When did that actually come in?
A couple months ago, I think.
That's crazy. There you How do you find people respond to being actually able to come in and chat with you about a lot of this stuff? Because I think as half of this is we bottle it up a little bit as well. So do you find that a lot of people have buried it for so long to the point where they do, instead of coming in being like, I don't know why I need to be here, they come in and it's just overwhelm on your end because they've got so much to unpack?
Probably like 99% of my clients, the very first session when they come and sit down, they just start crying.
Yeah.
You know, the moment they sit down. So I think it's just that recognising, acknowledging they've got a problem, there's something they're struggling with. At the moment they sit down, it's almost like
It all comes out.
it all comes out. Yeah, I've got a problem.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on my own, like, because I've been in therapy for quite a few years. I'm just such an advocate for it. I think even if you don't have anything wrong, it's harder to fix what's broken. But I think for the first 2 years I cried in every session. But then I got to like one session I didn't cry. I was like, oh my God, that was cathartic. This is excellent.
Well, there's a lot to get out. You know, like I said, you've been holding on to a lot of things for some people a really long time.
Yeah. It can be so nice though to like let it out as well.
It's important. I just let them cry. You've just got to get it out. You do feel so much better doing that, and then we can get on with, okay, what do we need to work on here?
Yeah, and because you do talk about being in the present, right? And like obviously experiencing those emotions, everyone tries and holds them off, you know, to just keep slogging through and getting through everyday life. But sometimes it is nice just to sit in them and let yourself. Like, do you find like it's a couple of sessions of sometimes, like kind of Maddie said, you just feeling the emotions with the person that's actually in the room?
Yeah, just acknowledging them, you know, acknowledging why you're feeling that way, and that's, you know, very normal based on what they're going through.
Yeah. For anyone listening, I guess, that is feeling quite anxious and might not be working with a therapist, do you have any like easy-ish to implement practical day-to-day things that they can do? Like you did mention, obviously, the walks and then taking note of the senses, but is there anything else?
Look, when we're really anxious, breathing is the first, you know, go-to. It's a quick fix just to bring the intensity of anxiety down. Just doing a quick breathing technique it is great to just sort of take the edge off the anxiety. There's colouring in is a good mindfulness exercise. So the measured brainwave activity of someone colouring in, and it's very similar brainwave activity of someone who meditates. So a lot of us struggle with meditation, you know, to just quieten the mind. Whereas colouring in is quite easy to do. Yeah. I don't know when you last coloured in. Have you?
I've got a colouring book in my office, like a big adult one, thank you. I'm yet to do it though. It's, again, one of the things that I'm like, oh, I'll do it later and just not get around to.
I think people just don't think it's going to have such a positive effect, but it really does, because what they found is that repetitive motion of the colouring in and the focusing, there's rules that you have to apply when colouring in. You got to stay within the lines. So, you know, you're doing that repetitive sort of motion and you're focusing on staying within the lines, and that can put you in a sort of meditative state. Yeah. It just quietens the overthinking, quietens the noise for just that moment when you're colouring in. Yeah. So people colouring in find it's quite relaxing and they enjoy it. We don't want to get caught up in it has to be perfect, because we've got some who are perfectionists. So, you know, I always have to say you can scrunch it up and throw it in the bin. No one's going to be looking at it. Yeah. We don't want to get too caught up in finishing the picture. You know, just 10 minutes every day is a good sort of preventative. So colouring in is quite easy to do.
Great idea. I'm going to get back out the colouring book.
Yeah. You know, I actually saw, this goes against everything we were talking about this morning, getting off the devices and everything like that. But
I saw
you can do
not colouring in on the app.
That doesn't count. That doesn't count.
I don't know. I'm just not. I'm not good
You're
with.
Like, no, get away from the
I'm
apps.
old school. I want the paper and the pencil.
You want to feel it.
I
want to.
I want to hear the sound of that pencil and feel it.
You can't be notified on a bit of paper, whereas if you're on your device, it'll be like bing, ding, ding.
The notifications will be going. They'll be going off.
Exactly. Too many distractions.
Yes. No, that's a great idea.
Have you noticed a big uptake in breathwork from the perspective of people actually attending breathwork classes or things like that? Because we've spoken to a few people now about breathwork. The last episode we just filmed was with Rory, and he's a huge advocate of it. Like, it's making its way into the corporate space now and in the performance space in sport and things like that. Have you seen a big uptick in like some of your clients or patients using those classes as a strategy or a stress?
No, I haven't seen any that have sort of been using those classes. We do a lot of breathing in our sessions, and they go away and implement that. But definitely breathing, it's so simple, but you know, we just don't breathe properly when we're stressed and anxious.
Yeah.
So, you know, we need to be aware of our breathing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely something I'm such an advocate for. I need to do more, to be fair. I used to do it quite a bit.
Yeah. And after the last couple of conversations and even today thinking about it, you're right. Like we do sit in that on kind of phase pretty well, and the only time we really get to switch off is at night when we're sleeping, and some of us, our minds are still going. So the whole breathwork side of things has been really interesting the last few weeks, because I don't know about you, but I've tried to implement some of the stuff, but I've even found I just feel better when I wake up in the morning. I feel less kind of on. I feel like I can roll into my morning and relax a little bit.
Yeah.
Actually, even every Sunday, it's been my tradition at the minute. I go down to Cronulla Beach, which you have to go past in the Uber on the way to your next meeting. But I go down there and I set up at the beach with a book, and like I read the book. And the other week I listened to Rory's Harley.
My goodness.
Maddie called it Harley.
So Rory's got a Spotify playlist with some free breathwork on it. Hale. I butchered the pronunciation, hence why I checked with your surname today. And I called it Harley on air, and he goes, "It is Hale."
Yeah, for inhale. Like I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But you know, and like I've even found like my mind just feels quieter.
Yeah.
Like it feels more relaxed. I feel
you've got golden retriever energy. It would be quite nice.
A little bit go. The mind's always racing. But yeah, like it's interesting that you say that, because I can see how that would be such a useful tool for someone, whether it's in a session with you or whether it's outside of a session, to just sit and actually reflect and kind of sit with your own breath and your own thoughts for a few minutes.
It's just getting back to basics, isn't it?
It's not sexy, but it's so good. It's so simple.
Fundamentals.
But it's nice to know there's just these little things we can do. We may not be able to change our situation or change our workload or things that are going on, but little things like that have big impact, you know, and can change the way we cope.
To tolerate it.
Yeah.
A bit of a random one, but I guess obviously working every day with people with, you know, different ranges of complexities and mental health challenges. If you're working with someone with anxiety, what gives you hope when working with them, if that makes sense?
Yeah, or what lets you know that they're headed in the right direction?
Yeah, like how do you know that things are going on the right track, I guess?
Well, I think the fact that they're coming
Yeah, true.
is, you know, a step in the right direction. You know, their motivation to want to work on whatever it is that they're going through, their motivation to change is there. But what gives me hope is I see it. I see how people work through their anxiety and they come out the other end. And I have hope for every single one of my clients that come in, because I know there's so many things we can do to support, and there's so many different strategies and treatment options that, you know, can make a difference to how they experience their anxiety.
Yeah.
I know. Oh, sorry.
There you go.
I was going to say, I know you worked with adults for a long time now, and recently you've started working with, or you work with teens in that as well, but more recently, school-age teens and things like that. Are you concerned for like where they're headed in terms of different generations and the different challenges and anxiety provoking things that that they're facing, like moving forward? Because you know, like you said before, we've experienced so much change in what we've seen in our lifetime, but these kids, you know, are now having to bring devices to school and
Oh no.
I know, disaster. But you know, like, is there an element of concern from like a mental health perspective there that, you know, are we ever going to get past this whole anxiety epidemic?
Do worry about our teens, you know, especially when I hear teens, and I hear it a lot, where they feel like they're already fallen behind, you know, and they're only just a teen, you know, that they feel
12.
They're like, I've got to have a house by 20 and I've got to have this.
You know, they're already disappointed in what they've achieved so far. Like, well, you've got a whole life ahead of you.
Yeah.
But they're already aware of that, and they're already comparing, because, again, you know, what I mentioned before, social media, they're exposed to so much more. they're seeing a lot more of what other people are doing, and it's making them not feel good about themselves. You know, they feel like they're falling behind. Other people are smarter than them or achieving more. So they're already anxious before they've even left high school.
Yeah.
So I do worry about, you know, how they're going to cope moving forward, because a lot of them we see are already quite anxious and burning out.
Yeah. Let alone being in the real world, right? Like this is just high school.
This is just high school.
And high school's already scary enough before
They're just surviving high school.
Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it? It's just, I kind of look at what even like we're going through and our generations are going through, and then I look at them and go, man, this is how much our generations have changed over a certain amount of years. They must be set up for some pretty big changes.
They have to deal with a lot more than what we dealt with growing up. You know, as I said, they're exposed to a lot more. There's a lot more pressure for them.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think as well, like resources and access to mental health resources is it's there, and there's a big awareness around it now. But like we've had a few psychologists on, and just access to being able to sit in a room with someone and talk with someone still probably needs to get a lot better as well. And having these services like a psychologist at your disposal and available is something that probably, as you know, a health system and as a world, we need to probably work on a little bit as well, I'd say. Just because, you know, you guys are quite high in demand, and, you know, that's only going to continue, I imagine.
Yeah, that is a concern. You know, you see a lot of teens that are trying to get linked in, and there's long wait lists to get in. So there's definitely in high demand, and we do want to keep encouraging teens to get comfortable and used to talking about what's going on, not to bottle it up, and to learn some really good coping strategies. I think if we equip them with some really good coping strategies, and they'll be fine. But they just need to access that support.
And as well, like I think the younger ages are becoming a lot more internal as well, right? So the more they use the social media, the more they use their devices, the less they are really practicing that face-to-face communication. And we were talking before about just handwriting quality. You know, like pen licenses are gone. But, you know, like even just being able to interact with someone is a landscape that it's a skill you have to practice.
Well,
and
they struggle with making a phone call. They will just, you know, avoid that if they can to make a phone call. They're just used to messaging.
Actually, speaking of social media, I did see a video the other day of a mum, and she had to write out this script for her like teenage son to phone up and make an appointment. It was like, hello, I would like to make an appointment, please. And he was so nervous.
Because when do they get to practice that? I mean, a lot of places now you can't ring to make an appointment. It's all online.
Yeah,
so it's sort of set up that way too. But then when, you know, the teens aren't using or practicing that skill of making a phone call and they don't ring their friends, you know, it's all messages.
That's it. Actually, speaking of, what do you think of the new law that's coming with the 16-year-old social
I'd like to see how that works.
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
Because, I mean, a lot of kids I'm aware of that were even under the age it was set at, and they still had accounts set up. They just set up just different birth dates. So
it'd be interesting to see how it all gets
I don't know too much about it, truthfully, but I am intrigued.
I mean, it's great that it's been acknowledged that this is a problem. I'm just not sure. I know with kids they're going to find a way to work around that for sure.
Devious little things.
They're very clever.
Yeah, I really do like, and coming back to what you were saying earlier though about holding hope, because if anyone's help seeking, I think holding that hope that they can get better and just being that person in their corner to cheer them on every step of the way is so invaluable.
Yeah, definitely. And to know they're not alone. You know, everyone's experiencing some form of degree of stress or anxiety, but it is important to talk about it. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. That was so helpful.
Thank you. I really enjoyed being here. I don't want it to be over.
I know. We've loved having you.
I'm so comfortable.
Sydney's calling.
I might make the move.
We've had another Melbourneite. Come on up. Join us. For our listeners that are wanting to learn a little bit more about you, and we will pop it in the show notes, but where is the best place to get in touch?
So I'm at Macleod Wellness Centre in Melbourne. It's probably the best way to get in touch with me. Yeah.
Beautiful. We'll pop the Instagram and the website in the show notes.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.
A couple more coffees. It'll get you through.
I'll be buzzing. Thank Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast.
Be the first to know when the next episode drops by hitting subscribe on wherever you catch your podcasts.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at wedon'tknowyet.pod.
See ya.